As you are all familiar, we had webinars in the last year about CGMES 3. And many of you, I believe, have been part of these webinars. But on this today, on the webinar, we continue to discuss and to inform you about the progress regarding CGMES 3, and this time about conformity assessment schema and test configurations for CGMES 3. So I'm going to share with you the presentation that will follow, and I think Svein can already start. If you are ready, Svein, you can start with the first slides of the presentation, or if you have something else to say here, please go on.
Yeah, I would like to welcome everybody to the webinar. As our Sim was saying, I will do the first part of introduction, and then Chavda Ivarov will do a little bit the second part, and then we'll take questions. But clarification question can be put it in the chat, and then our Sim will monitor that, so he can intervene. And we could do follow up on voice, but as there's quite a lot of people on the call, we will prefer to do it in the chat. Actually, could you give? Do you have the chance to give me control? I was just thinking on the when we get the animation, will be.
Yes, I think you simply have to share. I can stop sharing and you can.
Yeah, I can do that. I think that's easier.
It's easier, so.
You can see my screen. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. So what the thinking of the agenda will go to a little bit of an introduction on the topic, and then the second will focus a little bit about the CGMES 3.0 on the FDS version of it. We'll take a little bit about the relationship between the CGMES and the business process. Because there's a lot of things going on as well on the business process right now, so those part I will take, and then Chavda will go into discussing the main differences, the main changes from the CDV to the FDAS, and also go through the material that we have sent out that we want for review. And we will try to go as quick as possible so we can leave some time for questions, for follow-up. So be prepared for that. So as our Sim said, this webinar will be recorded, so it makes it possible to share with other people. So we asked people to mute themselves, and so we got good quality. And for any case of questions, submit it in the chat or raise your hand. So we'll take clarification things as we go along, and then major question, we'll take it in the Q&A session in the end. What we're trying to aim for on this webinar is to ensure that you guys have the necessary information to provide feedback on the conformity assessment scheme and the test configuration. So those are the primary stuff that we are looking for. We're also going to include the code components to help any development. We also hope to get as early as possible feedback from you guys that is going to work on implementing solution, so we have some understanding on items that has high or low impact and affects your implementation plan. And we hope that with this information, it makes it possible for the tool vendors and the utility that will later on implement the support for 3.0 and thereby able to support the different business process with feedback on possible times when we can start using CGMS 3.0.
Then one organizational thing. I think maybe you need to update your local copy of the slides.
Oh, good. You found spelling mistakes here.
Good.
That's good. I did it before the meeting, so I guess there's last minute.
SharePoint.
Does it looks okay now, Chowder? Yep, there you go.
Yeah.
Component. Yep, good. Yeah, so tool vendor and utility to make sure that we have understanding of the resources. That's why we're trying to highlight the stuff that we think might have impact, so you can, or higher impact, and then you can investigate that in more detail, or as well in our next webinar we can go through those in details. So this is a follow-up of the 3 webinars we had last year. So it has taken us a year from going from CDV to FDIS. It's always hard. I mean, some of the stuff is complicated. It has taken us some time, but we hope that we have come up with good solution for utilities that make the requirement, meet the requirement, and not putting too much burden on the tool vendors. So we're trying, and also what we tried is to enable this for the upcoming steps. And as we highlighted, CGMES 3.0 is very much a service pack. We're trying to fix some of the shortcomings and align a lot of the different standards documents. Again, helping both the utilities and the vendors to know what is the requirement the tools and the system needs to comply to. So we have underneath a link. The documents was published on the CGMES group on the CDV. You do require a login, but if you don't have one, I think if you just contact our SIM, we may be able to organize that with the CGMES group. So this one, we kind of expect people that had joined the webinar a year ago, but maybe not everybody remember everything the same. So feel free to ask questions that, but basically we will probably just refer to this and for the detail. On this too, we have set up 2 webinar sessions where we are focusing on the conformity assessment schemes and the test configuration and also the code component. So this one on the 22nd, we're just giving you an overview and making any clarification on the stuff that we have provided. And then we hope to, by 10th of March, that you are able to give us feedback on question, problems, errors, so that we can also address them on the 15th. I guess we will not really necessarily have the solution on the 15th, but we will go through all those concerns that come up and then inform everybody what will be corrected. So if we look, the core thing for the 3.0 is not the standardization is not the goal in itself. It is to support the business process. And what happened now, we have 2 major business processes that are using CGMS. It's the 10 years network development planning, and we have the CGM. The original CGMS 2.4 was developed for the long-term planning, that's the 10 years network development planning, but with in mind what the CGM needed, but the requirement wasn't clear. So we kind of had to some extent, guess or using qualified assumption what will be. Now we've gone through the whole process and we have kind of got feedback and we have kind of embedded all of the changes that we need to support the CGM. But without breaking stuff for the 10 years network development planning. And as well, we have aligned all this with the IEC standard. So the 2.4 was based on a technical specification. That means it has a limited validity period and is in principle planned to be replaced. And that's what we are doing now with the with now creating IIS. A little bit strange in the way we ended up. The numbers is the same. It's just that it's a TS. So this is edition 1, but in the edition 1 of the IIS rather than the TS. Yeah, I mean, the whole thing is to provide tool vendors. So back to this, we had the Cgms roadmap that we've been using as our guidance. In that, we kind of align quite a lot of different releases. It seems that it will be far less than this, but still we try to work in parallel, meaning that we have kind of 3 tracks of work. So this is the track that is for the CGMS. At the same time, we have started other work for what will coming up, and we think that we will then later this track will go over to be in the conformity assessment, but there will be new thing coming up. So it is important to understand that we will do a lot of work in parallel. And if we look at the scope for the CGMS roadmap, the first part was the consolidated, where we alignment with and bug fixes from the IEC and kind of consolidated all the different user guides or implementation guide. And then we had the network code plus, where we looked at additional profiles and also having a tighter consolidation with the market. And then Wisdom 1.0, where we have more focus on the network code and also harmonization of validation rules and reference tool for validation. And then Wisdom 2, update base on Wisdom 1, so we're going to improve it and also improve modeling of HVDC and power electronics. And then we had the future, where big focus in harmonizing of TSO and DSO modeling. And what we believe we have fully covered in the CGMS 3.0 is what we set out for the consolidated. In addition, we have taken everything that we knew from the HVDC and power electronics, so that has been included. Then we know there is some minor issue with HVDC that we are planning to fix, but there is a lot of work now going on that we are waiting to make sure that we have all that we need into it. So we kind of having a good base for making that necessary update on HVDC. Without digging down in the requirement, we kind of addressing the high level requirement that we knew were shortcomings. So these items that we marked yellow, like harmonization validation rules, Chavda will come back to that, looking a little bit on the use of OCL and where we are going in the direction of using shackle. We believe that there will be more and more standardization, but we have our initial presentation there, or original proposal, and on the level that we need to start using it to see what the benefit and what the shortcomings are. We have also worked with that so we can get more reference tool for validation, and then not least really strongly support model-driven validation. Again, we think that there will come up some other items, but we also hope that this will help all of the tool vendors, because as we're moving forward and more of the data is not necessarily managed in each of the vendors' tools, it could be different. We back to model management requirements. There is a stronger need to make sure that the input data is fit for purpose. And thereby all of these rules that is helping. So previously when everything was modeled in the tool, that any input will fit all the calculation engine and everything. Now that is not necessarily the case anymore. And that's why we have spent a lot of time to help this part. And hopefully you like what we've done. And if you don't, I hope you come back with good proposal for us to improve. We also had been involved in quite a few R&D projects where they're looking at TSO and DSO modeling and inter-exchange. We know particularly there are some requirements around short circuit that we probably need to address in upcoming, but we really tried as much as we can to have a view that CGMS 3.0 can also be used for distribution. And the idea here is that we can have CGMS as an addition to the model, and all our future requirements will fit this without the need to do too much changing in the existing items. How well we succeeded, that will be also good to know, because it's back to the people implementing it to say, but that has been our intention. The CGMS 3.0 has had a long birth, or a long time. The work kind of started in 2014. So CGMS 2.415 was approved in 2014, and already at that stage we knew that we had some shortcomings that we then started to implement in some implementation guide. Some of these stuff was step that we did was a mistake in my view, and that led to this idea of consolidated. So what we're trying to do is learn from this so that we are more open and saying there will be changes. So everybody needs to be prepared, and we will try to have a very good release plan and understand and inform what is to change from everything. Because making even small changes with a very ambiguous way is just creating a lot of noise and a lot of challenges. So we will try to do better on that way. In 2018, the SOC, which is the System Operating Committee, which is the one that has the Common Grid Model process, is responsible for that, approved the roadmap, and it was primarily to look at the CGMS. It's still also looking at the long-term planning. And in September 2019, we had the underlying work for CGMS was then approved to enter into a standardization process. And then in December, we had the CDV out for comment. And in January and February, we presented this to the TSO and vendors in the CDV and those 3 webinars. And the input from the webinar and the input from the standardization process, we used that from April until we published the FTIS. At the meantime, we also had some tool vendors providing alpha release, really to see, was this implementable? What is the major, drawback in the CDV? So we can learn from that. So we try to do that in parallel while updating it. So in October, we had our FDIS, October 2020, finished, and we submitted it to the IC. And in December, we had first tool beta releases that was based on the FDIS. And we are now waiting a little bit for the ICs to publish the FDIS. They're now going through it. There was work initiating to get it translated, and we're now working on making sure that they come up with the English version before the French. The expectation now is to have the FDIS being published in March 2020, and there is shorter review period for the FDIS. Basically, it's a technical, it's editorial items, and then June, July, the publication of IS. And in a way, as soon as we have the FDIS published and we have all the feedback and we are happy with the conformity assessment scheme and the test configuration, we might be able to start up the factory acceptance test and parallel run. So it will still be possible to do the conformity to 2.0, but we are, hoping that all the vendors, as soon as you have the tool ready, you will be aiming for the conformity assessment. And in regards to conformity assessment, we have made some changes. So without going through the detail of the conformity assessment, you can look at that in the documents. But basically, we have three major roles. We have the assessment body that is driving the review. That is currently done by ENTSO-E, but what we are open now for is to have test labs that is willing to do the testing, can perform it, and also for the long term when we're looking at standardizing the conformity. And the major driving for the long-term conformity standards is the idea that DSO will also start using it, and then it becomes a bit outside the scope for ENTSO-E, and it becomes more and more important for us to standardize it. So ENTSO-E would like to be the option body still. The group that is doing is a SIM expert group. So it's a selected or elected subgroup of the SIM expert group performs the role of opinion body. As we probably would look at, maybe another way of dealing with this when it goes into our conform standardization. However, we need to make sure that the opinion body is taken over by a good role. The schema ownership is owned by ENTSO-E, and also what we're aiming for now is to have it ENTSO-E, but the long term is to also standardize the test schema. So again, we're trying to make it sure it's more mature, because it will take a longer time to get the update into the standardization process, and we're waiting to make sure that it reaches necessary maturity. So if we're looking at about the CGMS and the business process, this is quite complicated. So we have tried to make a slide that gives the information without distorting it. I mean, the devil is in the detail. I'm not really planning to go drill down all the detail, so I'm trying to get the high level. Some of it I will drill down in other slides. But if we're looking at the dependency and the building up, so if we started in so CGMS was developed with 2.4 and actually 2.4.14. And then we had 15, and that's 2015. And then we created the, which was based then on SIM 16. But, you know, as you can see, the 16 was published in 2017. That's 3 years after the CGMS. And then we had a set of implementation guides. And in principle, this implementation guide is what's been currently used for the 10 years network development. As we then moved along, we created the TS in 2017. And the TS is what the business process, particularly the CGMS building process, build the quality document, the AC implementation guide, and the DC implementation guide. At the same time, we had the 450 series of document was developed on 16. And all of these had deviations. And the idea that the TS is has a limit time, and the whole idea to get a TS was to later to make it an international standard or merge it into the standard documentation. However, we don't have an overall in the 450 series. We don't have an overreaching standard that is explaining how the different standards fits together. So the 600 will still aim to do that until we are finding something that puts it together. The plan is to update the 450 to be similar to the 600. So the consolidated was started, and now it is an FDIS. It is based on SIM 17, and the yeah, the 301 2020. And what we know it is there will come out a small amendment to make some fixes that we actually discover as part of the profiling. So that's why the amendment 1 will be coming out. Then we have assumed that these amendment will come in because, you know, those basically bugs. So that is, and in this process, we took all the experience from the implementation guides and the quality document and made everything that is standardized that can be used for all of the process. We put them in. At the same, we took, you know, our experience from make it into the information model at the same time. The only problem is we have some very small extension in SIM 17 that is in the EU namespace. It is in the 301 as an annex, but we tried really hard to make it part of the normative, and we have a stronger case for that for SIM 18, and the belief is that all of them will be embedded in this 18. So at the same time, we are we're starting the process of looking at the Network Code Plus that will also have fed information into the consolidated CGMS. And this is addressing things like header information and also addressing coordinated security assessment. So this will be information I will try to provide as we are moving forward with these paths as well. At the same time as we develop the profile in CGMS, We have also been coordinating everything with the work 13 to make sure that the 450 standards are aligned with what we do in the CGMS. And the idea is that all of this experience will come up in the upcoming version. So this is what we refer with the CGMS consolidated, the 600-1 and 2, and the 300. And principle, we should also have the 302, but again, we simplify the model here. And the plan is that from this, there will also be developed implementation guide for the CGM process and the 10 years network development process. And the agreement, or what we're looking at, that these business process can constrain the CGMS, but should not add new vocabulary, new attributes, or new fields that will be going into the process. And of course, now there will be in this process where we add this. So we are making sure that we are aligning up with the standard, but they will be having the possibility to constrain it due to business requirements. And also, yes, which could include particular attributes or values that needs to be used. So if we look on the detail on the -2, so 600-2 2021 edition 1, which is current. What we have done, we have tagged the EQ boundary as deprecated. That means that it's still valid, it's still supported, but what we're indicating that this will go away. The plan is that anything in the EQ can be part of a boundary agreement. What we have to establish is also how we deal with reference data. So like the scheduled resources attributes, those are common reference, the same as base voltage. Those are not really boundary information, but they are embedded in the current boundary. But with the step that now making connectivity nodes primer, we don't have the needs for the topology, boundary topology. So that is no longer supported or no longer needed. We have put everything in the EU namespace for all the profile. But most of these profile we have currently aligned with what we're coming up in the 400, but those are not final yet. So if we look at what's coming up, is our plan to make an amendment. So that's where our expectation. And with that amendment, we will only have okay, now it says addition 2 there. So either addition 2 or amendment 1, we'll see. But hopefully amendment 1, meaning that we don't really do any changes, because we're basically just referring to the other document to have the same stuff. But the idea is here we have to have the core equipment with the boundary node information, and also the identify object extra attributes, and then we have the wind park and the solar park. So that's what our thinking will be left in this one. For geographical location, we have some particular requirement that is not part of the -13. So we also expect that to be left in there. Now I have left out the 453, but that is also planned to come out. If you look at the different stages, so the -13 is now planned to be an IS in scheduled to be on the 25th of March. So that means that is publicly available on IS. Then the dynamic edition 1 457 is planned to be an IS in March as well. They finished the FDIS process, so it's only the IC that needs to kind of finalize it. Then we have the 452, the equipment that is in the process of going into FDIS. So we are making those final adjustment, so it makes into an FDIS, where I think it is done, and then we're just waiting for IC to publish it in the FDIS. The CDV for the 456, the CDV is now out for review until the 9th of April. And so the current CDV there is aligned with our FDIS. And if there are any changes adapted, the idea is that will be the one that proceed. So with the amendment, we change this, but of course after the amendment. So the -2 is the one that is still going to be valid. Yeah, and the 453 has got approved DC, so that will go out to a CDV any day soon. This hasn't really changed profile dependency, but what we have in the document, we kind of distinguish a little bit of the profile dependency, and that meaning that in many ways you can look at the vocabulary. So where you have defined your vocabulary and where you refer to it. So in the dynamic profile, we are using elements from the core equipment. And the same, of course, for diagrams, we're also using core equipment. And then now we also align the operation, and the short circuit also uses the core equipment. We have moved more stuff into the core equipment, so breakers are now also into the core equipment. And that is more and more tool vendors is going in the direction node breaker. The bus branch becomes more and more a set of studies that you run on top of that, still covered by the topology process, topology profile. So you have the same, the topology, state variable, and the SSH is also now using the equipment. And of course, these are less, they are still creating their own core classes. Rather than what SSH is just adding items on the existing classes from the equipment. Yeah, and we still have the boundary here, as we said, and the geographical location is also using it. We spend quite a lot of time trying to also looking at the instance dependency. And with the changes to the connectivity node and topology, we made also some implementation here. And we hope that this makes it clear. And the idea here is that the core equipment is the primary, and we can add short circuit information on top of it and operational on top of it, but it's referring to the core one. And of course, you can then have multiple instances of the short circuit and operation referring to the same equipment. Dynamic, again, it will needs to refer to the core equipment, but that's the only one. Diagram layout is using the core equipment. It can also refer to a dynamic and can also refer to topology. And the DL is associated with one or more in the TP. Then you have the state variable is referring to the core equipment, and the idea here, the topology is then referring to the state variable. So indirectly, you will go through the equipment. And that is just to avoid getting multiple reference. And what do you do when if this reference is different, you get in contradiction. So it's better than to leave that out. Okay, it may need that you have to do interference, but we believe that is better than duplicating it. It could be easier for the sender to generate all of them, but it's also hard if you have different system that's generating, because then they need to keep track of all the tracking backwards. Rather now they can just refer to the exact document they are dependent. So you have the same with state variable that is referring to topology and indirectly here and then indirectly to the core. And the geographical location is both for the equipment and the core, the boundary. And the same, the boundary, the core equipment is only for the boundary reference. Yeah. So we hope this clarifies things, and we know that some vendor may have to spend a little bit more implementing it than other, but we hope that this makes it clear. Then I will leave it up to Chavdar to take the next bit. So Chavdar, do you want to share yours?
Maybe you can just continue.
I can continue, no problem.
Okay, so maybe just to a little bit follow up on the last slide. So in the FDS, so in the final document of 600-2, that requirement for the header was written as a minimum requirement to ensure the transition, as Sven mentioned. This might create some headache for some vendors, and that's why we wanted to still allow to have all the reference that you are doing now for CGMS 2.4, but we want to transition it to more clear way. And another clarification that I don't know, maybe it didn't come that clear, is when we were mentioning here that the extensions are part of the 301. So, you know, the 301 is the standard that defines the canonical SIM. And in that standard for SIM 17, these extensions were, although put in the annex, they were put in a normative annex, while for SIM 16, that same annex was informative. So in a way now, although they're in the annex, they are kind of required, at least for Europe.
So, I think we have two questions here for the dependency diagram. Maybe we can,
okay,
if you want to now, or if you want in the end, whatever.
Yeah. So if it's clarification, we can take it now.
Yeah, it's from Yang Feng that you mentioned AQBD is going to be deprecated, but it still shows up in the references. Is it going to be one way or the other?
So what we mean by deprecated in this, it means that it's still valid. So in the 301, it says a good definition. I should probably put it up there. It is just an indication saying that this will go away. So be prepared. So it hasn't gone away. So the TP, the EQ TP is gone, but the EQ BP, so the EQ BP, the TP BP has gone away. The EQ is still there. But what we are saying is it will be taken over by the EQ. And because what we're seeing is that there are more and more stuff that needs to be part of the boundary. We have stuff like SIPs protection schemes are shared. There are other between TSO and DSO, you get shared. You can share a lot of different things inside a substation. And you can basically end up with quite a long part of the model being shared. And keeping this as a separate boundary, separate profile doesn't make sense. But we will have a way of tagging what is a boundary. So that's why the EQ boundary is still there until that is being clarified.
And there is one, I'll say, more for clarification, I believe. It's about the association between short circuit and equipment. So there is a question why the multiplicity is 0 to many, but not 0 to 1 on the diagram.
Yeah, that was a good question. I was start thinking about that as well. In principle, I guess normally it would be 1 to 1 there, but I guess in principle there's nothing saying that you only update the short circuit of the information on the equipment. Chavda,
Okay.
do you have any better answer?
No, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe a thing to look in the amendment.
Yeah.
So,
I really think so.
Yeah, definitely. So we will have we have only these two comments for, maybe we can go on with other slides.
yeah. Okay. Yeah, so we will be zooming now in basically these three areas. So what are the main changes from CDV to FDAs? Then we will go a little bit towards the conformity scheme and test models and the code components. Sometimes it can get a bit too technical, but I'm hoping that yeah, you will get some insight that would help you in the review process for the next 3 weeks, as Sven mentioned. So I will go now bullet point by bullet point to tell you a little bit in the details. So we have quite a bit updated the terms and definitions in both 600-1 and 600-2. And one of the major clarifications was that before in the standard or in the technical specification was a bit of confusion of what we call merge and assemble. So now this is quite improved, and there is related definitions that basically say if yeah, it's kind of composed set of chain of definitions that lead to the assemble and merge. So now basically what we call merge is even if you put two different model authorities set together, then it's a merge even if you don't do any load flow. And before the notion was that if you just concatenate the files, it's an assemble, but now that's a merge. So that's just to point you out that before starting reading the document, stop on the definitions and get some clarity there, because otherwise it might be confusing. Then the next item is that we were working hard to clarify that the topology profile is an output and not input. And if you remember, like 1 year ago when we had these webinars on the CDV of the draft version of the CGMES 3, there were many of you saying that we need to bring more clarity of how to support the hybrid node breaker and bus branch models. There was this idea to have indication in the file header, depending on which profile, is operation profile included or not into the dataset, into the instance data. And all that was all confusing. And at the end, this led to the agreement based on the comments that were also received via the IEC standardization process, that the connectivity node should be into the equipment core. Also, from the operation profiles, schedules were moved to core, which is a little bit also a few bullet points down. And with that action, we left in the operation profile only measurement related classes and the short circuit remained only with the short circuit data. So everything what is was kind of maybe unnaturally split before, now it landed in the core equipment. And if you also look in the 452 standard, which also which standardized the three profiles: core equipment, operation, and short circuit, there, core equipment is actually what is called the EQ profile, and operation is the operation profile, and short circuit profile. So we followed also the same logic in 600-2, as there are three separate profiles. We didn't change the concept how these should be exchanged in separate instance files or in one. So this is left as before. So as Sven mentioned, there is no boundary topology profile. And another reason related to this is the fact that boundary points in general can be positioned in substations, and it was almost impossible with the changes we did with the connectivity nodes and related associations to leave the topological node to be a fixed one. So due to switching conditions, if we have boundary point in a substation, the topological node could be quite different. So it will be very hard, this topological node, to be agreed before the exchange. And so that was also one of the reasons to take the boundary TP profile out and to rely on proper setup of the equipment model, and the TP will then be produced by the tools which aim to calculate the load flow and export it on an assembled model. Then I mentioned already for the connectivity nodes. So now every CGMS 3.0 compliant model should be built on the connectivity nodes. So the topological nodes are clear output. This is both if your elements or how to say the devices within the equipment are not really like a node breaker model before representing a node breaker model, it should be still having the connectivity nodes in there. So with these changes, so then we had this natural change to have for a merge model one TP instance file in the same logic like we had it in CGMS 2.4 for the diagram layout and SV. So in that way, so we have better consistency and less confusion. We revised the declaration of the model authority set in the header. So in CGMS 2.4, it was written that it's not required or even it's not exchanged. The model authority set for the SV and DL, but now that's changed like 180 degrees. So now we have the TP also include, and we require the model authority set for these three in the header, and that will be the one that generates this data. So header dependencies we already mentioned. Sven had a diagram on that. So this is another area that you have to look and update yourself. Schedules I mentioned, they're now into the core equipment. And then we looked at the code components. So we had a long discussion of how to handle the RDFS. In the previous export, we had various combinations of RDFS, of equipment plus operation, equipment plus short circuit, and all three together. So now, since we separated in the Enterprise Architect project file, the three profiles are now three separate packages. And then it made possible also to naturally export three separate RDFS, which of course could be combined in different implementations. A major effort has been done to align all different constraints that came in the last years, and to migrate as much as possible of this into the 452 standard. So the 452, for those of you who are not familiar, is defining the core equipment, operation, and short circuit, and the 456 is defining the SSH, TP, and SV. And what actually happened is during the 2020, based on the comments received through the IC channel on the draft document, the draft CGMES 3, there were a lot of areas where we realized that there's a lot of ambiguity, and because of the fact that these constraints are quite a lot, they are quite also dependent to each other. We try to split as much as we can observe. It's very hard at the moment to really make 100% consistency. So don't be surprised if you still find something which is not as perfect as you want to be. But that's why we expect from ENTSO-E and in general from IC to get as much as more input when also the standard starts to be implemented, and there is also more feedback from real implementations. As Sven mentioned, we now have the tendency not to have too many documents that are issued on a very, how to say, a quick process, but to have more the notion of using the amendments to the IC standards and fix the core specification. So this alignment on constraints, it's something that it's quite important. There was a lot of changes there, and the best is that you make sure you review the clause 16, which is in the 600-2, but also all the table of constraints indicated included in 600-1. And normally the 600-1 as well have some short change log, unless in the beginning in the forward. So then you will see where to look for changes. This set, so as Sven mentioned, the 452 and now also 456 are going through their standardization process. And there were like 3 to 5 things which were spotted in November and which we included into the 452 changes. So as Sven already mentioned, the idea on a long term is to have the 400 series standard leading. And if you see that in the 600-2, many of the constraints are tagged as a 452, 456, or 457, or 301. So it's not the idea that in 600 everything is totally changed, but 600 is kind of dependent on the underlying base standards. The core idea behind this is that over time, now for example, we have the dynamics profile as a good example, which was voted positively approved mid of January. And now, as Sven mentioned, it will be it's just to be put on the IC web store. And that's the process which is pending by IC. But this standard is exactly one-to-one with what is the dynamics profile in CGMS 3. So in an amendment of CGMS 3, we can just refer to that standard, and we first have then one place where to look for documentation, and also we make the maintenance job a bit easier. So the profile URIs were updated. So compared to the CDV, so there was a discussion how to somehow harmonize there the different fragments of the URI. So they got changed, and now in the 600-2, as was mentioned in the previous slides, we use all of them are tagged as a EU. However, later on, naturally, some of this could just adopt the non-EU, because in many profiles there's no extensions, and if the profile is the same and there's no constraints that are different, so we don't have a reason to have a EU and non-EU version of the profiles. Something that we will also talk a bit later in the slides is that in the RDFS there was an introduction of a header for these schemas, and yeah, I think I have a slide to show you.
Maybe before we go there, there are a couple of comments, maybe just for clarification here on this slide. And one is from Young. Perhaps we already answered this, but a little bit more. So he's asking if you can clarify a bit more on TP as output only in terms of ENTSO-E business process. I'm not sure what is exactly asking. So TP as an output only in terms of ENTSO-E business process.
Yeah, I think maybe that goes in the direction of is it yeah, if you look at depends on the system. So what we mean here is normally an application should be able to consume the equipment and SSH file, and would not need the TP to produce a load flow solution. So it will do the topology processing internally, of course, can export the TP, and also will provide the SV.
Yeah, there is another related to this. If we are planning to define the profiles as XSD.
Yeah, there has been, I think, some discussion on that, but I'm not fully aware of the status. So maybe Svein, if you can jump.
Yeah, there has been a little bit discussion. In principle, you can that, but we are not planning to provide that. There are some people working on that, but in general, we think the shackle way of validating, it's better.
Yeah, I think some tool providers, we had some discussion. They wanted to show some examples of it.
But these
how
things
can
are more
be, but
stuff
it
that we
was-
can discuss in the question.
Yeah,
Okay.
also I can list this
List
for
them, and
later
we can
on.
follow those up.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so if we go further, what is next? Yeah, so as you see here, there's a list of the two FDIS documents, which, as Sven mentioned, these are already submitted to IEC. They were submitted on, I think, 14th of October. And they, since that time, they go the internal IEC translation process. And the process now is that they are sent to the national committees, and then they are voted, hopefully approved, and then they go straight to the publication. There's no, as Sven mentioned, room for content comments. It's only the typos can be more or less fixed, or formatting of the document. So that's provided to you now, not really for review, but just to have it as a background information where you also read the documents on the code components or conformity scheme or the test configurations.
So it's basically there to help you understanding the code component and get feedback on that. I mean, we do understand that some of you are members, and then you will have access to the CDV and of the FDIS as soon as it comes out. But as we're trying to do these processes in parallel, because to speed this up, we are providing it, but that with the guidance that this is only provided for this review process, and you have to be aware that you need to purchase the standard when they become available.
Yeah. So we can move on, I think. Okay, so now we come to the point where we really want your feedback in the next 3 weeks. So there, these 3 major items, so the conformity scheme documents, the code components, and the test configurations. And here, RSIM included a link to the WE transfer that you also got by email. But for those of you that missed that email somehow, you have it here on the slides, which will be distributed afterwards. So we can move on. So here for the conformity assessment scheme, there are many documents included in the package, but half of them are process-related templates that you will not find that much, how to say, content or technical information. Is more how to apply or how to fill in different things where the conformity starts. So I tried to indicate here with these signs on the left-hand side which documents are really essential for you to go through. And the first one on the conformity categories is kind of the document you should start with. So this is explaining what is FAT testing, what is SAT. It gives you a little bit on the overall setup and explanation regarding different conformity categories. Another basic document is the one on the bottom, so the conformity assessment framework, which is really the leading document in explaining the overall process and sequence of actions. So that document may naturally be a bit adapted. As Sven mentioned, there's this approach now to use the external labs. So it might be some things there if we have an external lab that might be then harmonized in terms of wording, but now we don't really know. And then we have 4 documents in the middle. So the conformity function category matrix and the test definitions report templates. So these are 2 Excel files. The first one is giving you the list of all test use cases and what is required for different functions. So we will zoom on that later on in the slides. And the second one on test definitions report template, this is describing each of the test use cases and giving the conditions or different steps that you need to follow to execute. So these 2 are really something that it would be very good to receive input, as we know that there is work to be done there, and we want to see the external view on that. Then the following 2, I marked the 2, but actually they are very identical in terms of content. So the important piece there is to see how what the changes were applied in terms of declaring different functions. And I also have a slide on that to zoom in. So we can go further. Yeah, so a few things that it's good to know. So in that conformity assessment scheme version 3, there's more clarification on the FAT and the factory acceptance testing and the site acceptance testing. There are definitions on that in the documents of the conformity category. So that's something to check and to be sure you understand that if application or tool is applying to conformity at first stage, it gets the factory acceptance test, which basically certifies or assesses the conformity of the tool against the CGMS, the standard, while the SAT is looking into the business process, where you may have an utility, TSO, DSO, things like that, to conform to a business process. And that utility may have more than one application integrated in a system, and with that together covers the conformity for given business process. So another obvious change we did, so now all the documents refer to CGMES 3. If you still need to apply for conformity for CGMES 2.4, then obviously the conformity version 2 needs to be used. Then we have clarified a lot of things related to the profile and function category, and that will come a bit later in the slides. So that's okay for now. The test use cases were revised, although we tried this revision to be very minimal. So it was more to clean up some consistencies. You still see the same number of kind of official test use cases, and there are maybe 15 to 17 additional test use cases added as a draft, and these were all prepared in previous work and projects in the last 4 or 5 years, but they were never provided for comments. So ENTSO-E agreed that these are included as a draft and they are clearly indicated draft. So if there are some early feedback related to this, it will be very good then to see how to finalize later on. So here there's a typo, so the focus is not but now. So now we focus on FAT. Another major thing that we see is still a kind of a pending action, and we were not able to finalize this at the moment because the test configurations are not in a final stage. So as you know, we try in the test use cases to have a clear reference to what test configurations are used for different test use cases and steps. And in order to do that, we need to have the final packaging and the final models. So this is to do for ENTSO-E to fix. But if you have some preference and suggestions on how or which models are the most appropriate to list in different test use cases, or if you have some ideas of how test steps are to be optimized further, that's really the feedback we are looking. And it will be really very good to spend some time now in the next 3 weeks and to provide feedback. I think Arsim later on will show the test configurations and other comments forms that we plan to use to collect your feedback. So we can go further. Yeah, so now this, how to say, more or less table is included into the declaration of conformity and attestation of conformity. So it's identical in the two documents. And here the major change is that before the function category of import and export was down in the list with all functions. But at the end, there was a confusion that these are declared per different profiles anyway. So that's why we brought it there in the middle. And we then specified here this different full exchange, individual exchange, and difference exchange per profile and per function. So if you know that you only support core equipment and you only support the import, so then you need to indicate only in one place that you have, for example, full exchange on the import, and then so the different exchange, if you don't support, you don't need to fill in. So the idea here is a little bit that for the conformity assessment for a review team or a lab is much more easy to design more automated process behind that, but it's also useful for an end user, for example, for a TSO expert to look at this table and say, okay, so this tool is supporting this on the export, this profiles, difference file here and not there. There are two notations here. One is this NE, which means not evaluated. So it doesn't mean that your tool doesn't have functionality to support it, but you just, when you apply or when you assess, that functionality is not evaluated. And sometimes you see an A here in the middle, as Sven is pointing. That's on the topology profile, which doesn't support by the definition, by the CGMS. It's written that this is only exchange in full, so that's not applicable. Or and then in the Word document that you get for this declaration of conformity and attestation of conformity, these are fields, and when you click and fill in, then you get yes and no. So it's kind of yes no notation in the middle. In the functions and in the standard, we have still kept the three different grades, so the bronze, silver, and gold. And if you move to the next slide, Sven. So here you see the function category matrix, which also changed a little bit. First of all, it's very difficult to put as many conditions we want to put in this still two-dimensional table. So we have the bronze, silver, and gold here, and we indicate which are the required test use cases for these functions that you see on the top: import, export, update, and repository. We have that line is the functions, but we have a prerequisite. So the minimum requirements on, for example, if you go to the update and repository, you need to be a silver on the import and export. So here that's can get a bit oriented. And what we added also is a prerequisite for the profiles. So for that given function, you need to support this equipment SSH, TP, and SV, and the same analogy for other functions. Then on the very right hand side, you see also two columns here at the minimum required profile and relevant profile. So that was done to a little bit guide more. So if you don't support, for example, SSH, so there's no way that you can do the test use case for. So a little bit to help orientation and to hopefully bring us towards more machine way of doing the conformity assessment. So I think we can move on. Yeah, so there is that small table is also included in one of the Excels. And this gives you information for the profile category. So this middle part of the declaration of conformity, you have a list of required test use cases for different profiles and for different functions here. So that's set here. So these two tables are something that it's very good if we get some input. We know that it's not perfect, but that's the status we could get so far. And if you see some way to further optimize and easy for vendors who are going to run this test or for assessment bodies, so that would be really helpful. So we can go further. Yeah, now we move towards the code components. So I believe this should be what you got from RSIM. So the first one here on the file list is the constraints repository. So that table was produced in 2020, in last year, more or less at the moment. We had the CDV draft in a good shape, in a final, more or less, stage. And the attempt of this table is to gather all the constraints that are relevant for CGMES 3. It goes beyond the 600-1 and 600-2. As we know, these standards are using the canonical SIM, these standards also rely on the 400 series, the 452, 456, and so on. So we were scanning all the UML descriptions and these standards at the stage they were at that time. And we extracted all the English written sentences that have something to do with the constraints that could be checked or can be validated in a machine readable way. So that table may include a little bit more than all the machine readable, but it happened during the development process of this table that you see that multiple standards sometimes are restating the same thing. And that's something we need to improve in the future. But that was one way to gather everything in one place, try to map it to also to the present QSCDC, try to indicate the source of each and the primary source for this standard, and to see for the future how to handle these constraints. In that table, you will also see the references to the SHACO and the OCL rules that were also developed for these different constraints. And you will find these constraints both in the OCL and the SHACO constraints zip packages.
And I think it's fair to say it contains a lot of pain.
Yeah, it contains, and the pain is not over for all of us, but we think that moving forward towards more machinable, readable stuff, and to be sure that the community finds the best way how to maintain these components closer to the source and optimize and limit to that the constraints are checking as small as possible granularity. We know that we tend to write long sentences which are actually checking 5 different things. And that's extremely hard when you need to put that in a machine readable or to check consistencies between different constraints. So if we move towards the RDFS, you'll see here 3 zip packages. I will start with the middle one. So this version 2019 doesn't mean, so this is the first confusion that you will get. It doesn't mean that it's exported in 2019. This means that that export is the same like the export which was prior the 2019. So in the CGMES 2.4 and some updates after, we had the RDFS augmented kind of export from Syntax Gen from the Enterprise Architect project. And this is a RDFS which is kind of based on the 541. So this is the current standard, but that current standard is from 2005 or 2006. So as many of you know, during many of the interoperability testing and vendors feedback and TSO feedback, that augmented RDFS grew. And that's the version that here is tagged with version 2019. We didn't want to change that one. So that's in the tooling. So that's why we call it that way. Then we have version 2020. So it's called version 2020, not because it's exported at that time, but because if you go to the Syntax Gen add-in for the Enterprise Architect, in that development which happened in 2020, some further improvements were added based on the feedback which was received into the standardization process of CGMES 3. For example, one of the, basically the only major one was that the version class that we had before into the profile packages in the enterprise architect was transformed to an ontology kind of version class. So it got a little bit more standard. And in the 2020 release of the RDFS, that version class that you would see in the UML is exported as a header of the RDFS file. While if you do the export of 2019, you will see that the ontology class or the version class is exported like a normal abstract class into the content of the RDFS. So nothing really changes in terms of schema, but for those of you who before, if any, were relying on the version class to find it somewhere as an abstract class, you will not be able to find that in the 2020, but on the 2019 release. But what you have in 2020 is that you refer to the header and you find the same information there. So the thinking here is that moving forward, we want to kind of stop maintaining the 2019 export and to go with the 2020 as the information and the way how the different classes are serialized from the schema is the same inside. Now you see the first one, the 501 edition to CD. So CD means the committee draft. So this export here is a prototype version of the draft, which is now going into the IC standardization process. The core idea for this RDFS change is to make it more compatible with the W3C and other ontology ways of doing the RDFS. And here, for those of you who are familiar with the RDFS before, in the 2019, 2020 exports, you see this namespace CGMES, where things like stereotype, declaration, and all that non-standard, or which becomes kind of a SIM standard things, are now mapped to more international, I would say, or more ontology-based expressions. So the idea here is when you look at this export, what is important is to provide the general feedback and to see if you are missing some functionality. Maybe highlight it so that we can see if it's there, but in another form that you couldn't realize, or if it's something really missing and we need to add during the standardization process of the 501. What is important here is that the idea is that when the 501 becomes a standard, then we can rely only on that, basically. Yeah, Sven?
Yeah, so the thinking is that we should be able to generate the vocabulary classes, so the data classes in any language like Python, Java, or C#, based on this. And in addition, you'll be able to generate the constraint from the shackle constraint. So have a look, give us feedback as early as possible. We will still, even when the 501 is adapted, we will still maintain the 2020 for some time. But what we are is trying to standardize on the 501 edition 2 and with the shackle that Shavda will follow up on.
Yeah.
But it's important in understanding that we really want to support model-driven development so that we can easily adapt to changes. it is probably a full seminar to go through, or to quite a bit of webinar to go through all the stuff that we're doing in a 501. But we are getting it reviewed by the 3C community to make sure that we are following the best practice.
Maybe an ad hoc idea, if some of you are relying currently on the RDFS or want to rely, maybe you can mail RCM to express that interest, and perhaps you could be included in a mailing list, or for more detailed discussions. Maybe if there is a high interest, some separate webinar could be organized on the details there. So if we move on, the next one.
Don't you want to talk to
about
the shackle?
Yeah, I mentioned.
Oh, you have it better here.
Yeah, yeah. So this is a little bit further on the RDFS 2020, just to show you how the header looks like. But you will see also on the file. So this is basically the change.
And basically, this is back to, we probably need to go change on the teams. That's one of the things that we have got feedback from W3C. But it is addressing some of the issues that we had in 2014 about versioning of the ontology. And so that is a big issue in the W3C community itself. They are now starting to address this really seriously, and so we're trying to align with the best practice in that way, and again, to help you. So most of that header is all to deal with versioning and getting all reference, needed reference.
Okay, so yeah, next one. I think it's good to spare some time also for the discussion.
Yep.
So here is the list of the test configurations that you've got. So we have the microgrid, mini grid, Rio grid, small grid, and a new one is the Svedala. And here, maybe we go to the next slide where we have, I think, a little bit recap of what was before. So in the CGMES 2.4, we had these four test configurations, and they had a lot of types and different versions of node breaker, bus branch, and so on. And now in the 2020 discussions of updates towards the CGMES 3, there was an agreement that we need to minimize to the scope a little bit, or to have more focus on the node breaker, to clean up unnecessary types, so to make it more down to the point. And this is what we try to do now. If you go to the next slide, I think here we have the following base cases, and we are still in development process to get full grid. So hopefully something will come in the next 1-2 weeks. The current version we have is still a draft, but so it's getting updated. Then we have the four, as I mentioned, the microgrid, Rio grid, mini grid, and small grid in their base case configuration. So far the effort of developing this was focused to have a correct export in CGMES 3, and also to try to cover different constraints which are now included in CGMES 3, while developing these test configurations. They were checked against the shackle set of rules, and also against the SIMDesk early implementation. As Sven mentioned, we have a workable version of CGMES 3, which is also now being finalized to reflect the last version of CGMES 3 FDIS document. So we we have Svedala. So it's a new model here that was proposed to have some more close to reality node breaker model. So we plug that into the set, and we still need to develop different types of these models. And some of these models will most probably get some more elements inside. So you have to see when you open them. But if you find helpful that you are missing some particular element in that configuration and you think that that would be of added value, it's good to let us know so that we can consider if this is something that we already plan to do or it's something that we totally missed. So the intention is to have a different bus configurations like a round bus or some of these in some of the models to be able to join some of them together with the boundary, and the different types will also look at the HVDC configuration. So that will be rather minimal because we know the HVDC work needs to go further, but at least will be a good starting point for further updates. Something else here that you should also have in mind that some of the models like RioGrid had a different identification, like the IDs were more these string kinds of IDs and not the UIDs. So it was agreed that we try with the test data to give the best possible way forward, and not to say what is really allowed at the moment, but to show the best practice. So some of the models were adapted in that direction to be more as an example of good way doing it rather than all the possibilities which is allowed. So yeah, Sven?
Yes, so also what we said, there are some work going on with the DSO models, so we can take that as a separate things when we follow up. What we really now is the TSO, and what we embedded now with particularly with the Svedala that we got from SVK, Swedish TSO. That's very good third test model. So we get more a CGM or a node breaker model. Would also be good to know, should we stay with a lot of the few? Can we actually take out some model? If you find that this is already covered, that would be also good, because there is quite a lot of maintenance on these models, and we need to make sure that, you know, all this effort pays back. And the really guy is the vendors that is implementing this that really gets the benefit. Of course, a utility get the benefit that we get a working system, but you know, there's no point for us to maintain and or having them, and if it's if it doesn't give you added value. And in the same way, if there's stuff missing that you are discovering that, oh, it should be a test case, it should be a test model for this, you know, let us know.
Sven, I think that was the last slide. Yeah, I hand it back to you.
Good, thanks. That's we're just 5 minutes over time now. So only 10 minutes, but we took a couple. Arsim, do you have a good question coming up?
In fact, I think some of the questions were related to the topics that we were discussing, and one that remains is from Young again. It's about the documents. Is there a set of document files containing all model changes available for each profile? So he is asking if there is any specific document to list these changes. I think Tanya had provided one comment for that constraints are one explicit place for validation rules, but the profile itself defines the basis, so the classes, associations, attributes, and so on. I think this is what he mentioned related to this.
I would recommend to have a look on the FDIS, the end chapter, as Chavdra said in the beginning, that shows the changes that we've done. And in principle, these changes are reflected in the test models. To some other extent, if you have a way of doing compares, I mean, we might be able to do it, but it's always difficult between different versions. But in general, that would be the best. We, as Chavdra also pointed out, we haven't fully updated the test configuration. So in some way that will be a source, but sadly it's not benefiting you guys because it's so difficult to maintain all of that. But the idea will be, of course, the people looking at it afterwards. So when you compare at the stable version, there will be information here. Wouldn't you agree, Chavdra? That will help you. But you know, it's because it's not final. We didn't manage to do all of that, but the best place is to look at, basically to try to do compare between the old one and the new, and the second is look at what they have in the FDIS on that.
Yeah, there's also some tooling that can help you on the RDFS comparison, so that in addition to the enterprise architect comparison, so yeah, these tricks can be used.
And of course, as Tanya is pointing out, so now we really try on all of the we have a naming standard for all the constraints. So a lot of these things makes it easier for us to track what's happening. And a lot of these changes happening from something that's diffuse, so unambiguous, you know, and it's very hard for us to trace it in a good way because, you know, someone has interpreted in this way, other in another way. So I think it will be very good as now show the feedback document.
Because one of the questions is also to show the feedback to see how they can comment back. This is the table that we have generated with Chavdra and Svein together. And we have divided, so for each set of documents we have created different pages that you can provide your comments. For example, the first one is about test configurations, and here you have the categories here. So you have the issue number, the name of the issuer, you would have the date when you are going to submit the issue. You have to provide the configuration name, including the version here, and the issue description. And then you can also propose the change of that if in case that you have some proposal. And also you have to include for this the references to data or to the general comment. So this is for test configurations. And for conformity assessment documents, it's pretty similar. So you have the same categories, the date and the name. And we have to provide also the line in the document, because these documents, just for your information, I will submit them as a PDF with a line number. So you will have them after the call. And based on the line number, you can provide your comments. So you can refer to a specific line number for your comment and describe the issue. So then you have to describe the issue here, and proposal for change, as I mentioned in the previous example, and references to data or general comment. So in conformity assessment documents, we have also the numbers of the documents, so you can also provide that in case that you want to be more specific, or also the name of the document. So whatever you see as more useful for you to provide in these categories here. And then you can send me, of course, this table with your comments and issues, and then I will collect until 10 of March, and we will be addressing that on 15 of March on the second webinar. So for code components, we have also the same, almost the same table. We have the name of the who will submit the issue, the date to be submitted, the code component name. So you can provide here the name of the code component, the line in the code component file. Then you can describe the issue here, and you can also propose the change if you have a proposal for that, and you can provide the references to data or the general comment. So these are the categories that we have provided here. in case that you might have an additional comment or something that is completely not here, you can still provide in the columns and send to me, so I will just store all this information in the files, and we will be addressing them on the second webinar.
So
yeah.
Yeah, so what we don't want is to track changes in the document, because there are just going to be too many people, and that's going to be very, very hard for us to maintain. But on the other hand, you don't try to squeeze in pictures or code into this example. Just make sure that you have an issue number or something that we can refer to the issue. And have the contact person so we can follow up if we don't understand what it is. And then if you have an attachment, just put the name of that attachment, if it's a Word document, something that we can follow up. Because, I mean, obviously you can't put a lot of XML code or other stuff into those columns. So if you do that, that will be fine. And then we can track it back.
Yeah. This is, so as I said, you will have the documents in PDF, many of them with line numbers, and I think that will simplify also your commenting on that. So this is for the feedback template, that you will get it after the call. And yeah, if you have other questions about feedback, as Svein mentioned, you can write me today anytime, so you can just contact me for any issue regarding this or the documents that you receive. And I can provide you clarifications and additional information for your commenting.
So what we hope now is to get the feedback before the 10th of March. I mean, you can still commenting after that, but the one we're getting at that time, we will try to address in the meeting. And if there is a particular topic that you want us to go into detail, because now we're running out of the questions, but really what we were looking at is question related to where can I find, and the question, or how can I comment. So those are the key thing. And of course, until that, don't wait for the last minute. If there's anything unclear, give our SIM an email for any questions. And then, well, after we get the comment, we'll try to send an update in the email about the topics that we are trying to address in the next webinar.
Okay, so I think we don't have more questions here to address. And I believe that we could show most of the things that we planned, and I think we could have a good interaction and information for you. So we will keep in touch by mail, and I will provide you all these documents that I said, and we will be in contact for your comments and collecting all your feedback. I think I would like to thank you all for this time to stay with us, and I wish you a good day for all of you, and I propose now to close the meeting.
Yes.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.